Our association, as Matthias said, consists of many people.
From many different fields,
They
as
are-
you can see on the screen.
They are presented there,
Not all of us are musicians, but some are.
which is also important by integrating that musical element to people who are not familiar with music so well as musicians, for example. So we often experiment with what is accessible for people in this association, and they can also give like relatively feedback to what we are doing, and is it even making sense for them. So maybe just shortly, I spent a lot of time in Exploratorium's bibliothèque, reading about group improvisation. And when I finished my bachelor, I came back to Warsaw and then tried to include what I did theoretically in praxis. So that's how our association started to create events which were inspired from the open stage formula. I think some of you may be familiar with that format of picking randomly people to improvise in not previously prepared sets. But we really wanted to be open to a wider audience, to amateurs, professionals, enthusiasts who maybe never had an instrument in their hand, or never sang, or I don't know, recited poetry. So we tried to create some formats which will be the most accessible ones for those people. We organized plenty of open stages, free festival in summer, and they were actually that was a long process of becoming something we are now as an association, as a collective, and we're basically more active in small spaces or open air spaces, which are presented here in some very nice, cozy small houses in the middle of Warsaw. We invite you heartily to come there. But Maja, maybe we'll say something more.
In our first steps, we were experimenting with the simplest form of open stage, which is probably well known to Exploratorium visitors, which is a short musical piece of improv with randomly selected groups. So we were relying on our base of instruments and instruments brought by attendees. And the attendees were a bit different each time, but pretty fast we gained a group of regulars. And they were both amateurs, as we said, and sometimes we also had qualified musicians. And after a couple of events, we started noticing a sort of, let's say, burning out of this formula because the variety of attendees was not big. Very similar people were coming every time with similar instruments, and the course of events was starting to repeat itself. At least for us, seeing every open stage was a bit predictable. So we started to add some, to search, to try different forms to add some diversity to our events and reach more audience and participants from different fields, not only music, and also some graphic arts and film. So we decided to try a music improvisation based on images. And that's when we created a couple of different formulas. For example, we used graphic scores, creating music to a piece of art drawn live by a group of people, as we can see. We also tried open stage with using of digital camera, playing the images live on the screen, and the formula which we would like to focus on the most, based on the subject, on the topic of the symposium, which is creating live music to films. So we have some thoughts about the effects of these events. So open stage with the use of film was based on a randomly selected group of musicians. Again, the same as in this traditional formula. And improvising to the movie was we improvised to the movie that both musicians and spectators saw on the screen. And when it comes to the movies we improvised to, there were some silent films from the 20th century. For example, some silent horror movies were very
the
fun.
Early 20s of the 20th century.
Yes, were very fun to improvise to. We had some short films made by National Film School in Łódź. From students, coming from students, and some of old movies from the Polish analog camera archives. And we quickly started to notice that this kind of form was more approachable and attractive for the audience than the traditional formula, because as we said, we worked with amateurs a lot, so when the movie had the leading role and the music piece was based on some external stimuli, it was easier for more timid, shy members of the event to open themselves. And the attention of the audience watching the improv was not completely on the orchestra. They were more focused on the screen and the images, which was beneficial to the orchestra's self-confidence without the pressure of being watched constantly. It was also easier for the attendees, both for the amateurs and the experienced musicians, to take advantage of the image in looking for inspiration for the sounds and instruments they were about to choose. And the movie was a good reference point and inspiration for the musicians. And the movies collided with sound were creating more emotions than usual. There was laughter, we had sadness, we had anger, and these emotions were experienced collectively. And we have used this formula several times on different occasions in slightly different variations. And we have some thoughts and experiences coming from these events that we would like to share at the symposium.
Yeah, so first thing is something which we can call a diegetic and non-diegetic experience of the players. We observed that people approach group improvisation during our events, and we could explain that with an analogy to the terms I've just said. So diegetic, non-diegetic. Diegetic would mean in that case sounds belonging to the world presented on the screen. So such as music playing from the radio, which is seen on the screen, or a dialogue, or some sounds of the nature of city and so on. The non-diegetic would be rather the music which comes from other order, from place which is not present on the screen and is, for example, added in the post-edit. And in case of improvising to silent film, we could theoretically say that the only non-diegetic sounds appear because nothing is belonging to the original edit of the movie. But on the other hand, the imagined diegetic sounds play a very important role because they are imagined to be representing something which is seen on the screen. So we have two approaches, and one is to create more sound effects to images. Simple sounds that respond to the things happening on the screen. We can compare the improvising group to Foley artists who want to bring objects seen or not seen on the screen into sounding. And maybe we'll show some short example of how we sing that. In the falling people from the stairs, which almost instantly made people like imagine the sound of falling from the stairs, but actually like the rattles and other things are not the sounds I would say are the ones of people hearing someone falling from the stairs. But the other way is to create some kind of, the other approach to improvise we observed is to create some kind of, let's say, independent piece of music. Maybe we can relate that to non-diegetic sound, which can correspond and does that very often. And I think we've seen that during that symposium that it does with the film, but can be perceived as a movie soundtrack rather than something seen on the screen. And those two factors, we talked with people playing and also made some kind of live feedback from them. And we see that there are two factors which are important in order to see what makes them play in that diegetic or non-diegetic way. The first thing is, of course, the experience of the participants in playing music and improvising. Participants with no musical training or very few like hours spent on playing instruments usually take a role of Foley artists. They are trying their best to bring the imagined soundscape of the film into acoustic sonic presence. We predict it's a safer and more accessible option for them. It can also be explained with some kind of instinctive reaction to video, as we've seen, for example, before. Its musical potential, the potential, for example, of people falling from the stairs. This can be traced when we see something on a screen object, some object on a screen, and actions like taking footsteps, rushing water, falling objects. On the other hand, exactly at that point, we can hear how different the sounds of those commonly known objects are imagined. The example of rattle and falling people. The other factor is selection of the film itself. A film that proposes a lot in terms of plot and events, stimuli, movements, etc., make people more eager to soundtrack the film by sound making, by doing that Foley artist job. Films that are not based on extensive plot, when we don't have a narration which is very clear, it's more impressionistic, based on images, landscapes, without fast-paced action, make people create a musical piece, maybe. There are no events and familiar sounds that we can soundtrack, that we can make sounds to, so that fills the void, the audience fills the void and begins to create a separate, continuous piece of music to respond to the mood of the film, maybe, and give it new meaning, additional element to the image. We could say that it is that non-diegetic approach.
Another thing we noticed was a difference between familiarity with the film versus unfamiliarity with the film, like the audience knowing the film prior to the play and the audience not knowing the film. So in the beginning, we practiced the form in which musicians see the film for the first time during improvisation and get to know the film while playing. And over time, we began to experiment with the subject of familiarity with the film and present the plot and subject of the film before playing it to the audience, like verbally talking about it. We also tried a formula that involved seeing the film before improvising and creating music after seeing the film. And the conclusions were that familiarity with the film pushed the orchestra to build up the suspense and action more precisely, to be more restrained, timid in use of sounds and volume. And it builds up the atmosphere because the audience, thanks to the familiarity with the action, knows and can plan ahead at what point they will decide on stronger or less intense sounds and measures. And familiarity with the film also made a difference in the audience's confidence in participating during the improvisation and at the time of volunteering to take part in the piece, because of course when they knew the film they were more eager to take part in it.
Yeah, and then there's another thing which we would define as responsibility of the outcome of the improvisation, and also responsibility on the side of the organizer who picks the film. So the selection generates how people play. We assume that it has a big influence on that. So when we choose a film, you need to have in mind what we want to achieve. selecting a film that does not offer too much from itself in terms of plot, action events gives the improvising group more creative potential. It allows improvisers to give the film additional qualities, extra layers, meanings through music. So selecting a film with a fast-paced action events makes us focus more on creating sounds for those very fastly going events. So it probably also would mean that that fast pace would be transferred to playing group. But this is more reproductive, I would say, and more convenient for audiences with less experience. So we've seen that fast-paced films are also influencing people to be more eager to improvise. And also picking slapstick movies was a very important thing, because I think that creates some kind of community of laughter, that we have like a common reference point on the screen, which is seen by all of people, and then the players and the audience. And for example, making a strange sound of a person sliding on a banana peel, let's say, can create some kind of slapstick effect, which is readable and makes sense for both the audience and the players. So actually, that we were trying to achieve so many places where that community can be achieved, and that was also our requirement while picking the movies. But also we could say that it's not obvious if every sound made to a person who slides on a banana peel and falls down is always adequate. And that leads us to the last aspect of responsibility lying on organizers. So actually picking a film is also an ethical question for us. And it's not just about making decisions or including things that would trigger would be a trigger contents, like drastic images, for example, which may be obvious, but often films bring some sensitive topics, but not directly. They are just very subtle in a way. But then we can ask a question: can an improviser who is seeing a film for the first time read all those hidden meanings while he is or she is improvising? And for example, members of the audience can read that very quickly, but they are not in the same situation because they're observing that from like outer perspective. So, for example, making a firing cannon or a rifle funny, which happened in our improvised sessions, is kind of a big question: what's funny and what's not funny, and what's ethical and not ethical, in a way of changing the context of the whole film, or changing the like its message. So that's why we decided to make short introductions to films, what Maja already said, before playing, but also making the selection more strict. We noticed that ethical issue when we used documentary films as matrix for improvising. We were concerned how far we can interfere with the real experiences of people shown on the screen, like real histories, by changing their reception within the music. So we have to keep in mind what we want to achieve and what outcome we can bring.
So another thing is the role of the conductor. At some point we decided to use the option of a conductor who directs the orchestra, which benefits the quality of the piece, we could say, and makes it more attractive for the audience and players to participate. Also, it makes it easier to create a piece of soundtrack that is consistent with the image, but also diverse, with a beginning, middle, and end, without repetition and getting stuck on one rhythm. And the participation of the conductor helps to create non-obvious duets of people who wouldn't normally co-join together, who would normally play together and synchronize. And also it makes possible to bring out quieter instruments or more restrained, shy players, and prevent one instrument or the loudest and most confident player from dominating the others, which sometimes happens with both amateurs and qualified improvisers, I'd say. It also makes it possible to create slightly longer forms and choose longer films, because conducting prevents monotony and falling into repetition.
Yes. Yeah, so you see people focused, and maybe you cannot see that very clearly, that the emotional states they are in right now. But generally, during the open stages we organized, there are a lot of emotions going through. Frustration, very often, when something not matches what we wanted to hear. Often joy. Then fear that something is not going to happen, anxiety. And I think films like music can bring, especially combined, very powerfully people into some particular emotional state. But also, what we mentioned already, emotions are very helpful by creating some kind of community in the group of playing people, but also between audience and players. I've already named the example of slapstick. So comedy, happiness can create that kind of community of laughter, but also saying and performing a sad situation, whatever it means in that particular sense, can create some kind of community of sadness. And we can multiply that I guess. So those communities are very temporal. They are ephemeral. They last, for example, for a few seconds or minutes, or maybe for a whole performance. But it is a motor. It's running the whole group improvisation, and we've seen that the more the more people had in common while playing, made them also more eager to play and, for example, stay for a longer time with us or come back. And I think improvising against the image, so doing that in contradiction, is also some kind of community. Like maybe it's more for the experienced players, but it's like that contradictory community based on the stage.
So another thing we can get from live improvisation to the film, it is originally a thought coming from Zosia, from our association, who is a DOP. And we used her movies in our events, which was an interesting occasion for her to get live, second to second, very specific feedback of emotions and impressions of the audience watching her movie. So experiencing event like this is a good way of getting to know the audience as a cinematographer, learning how the chosen movie language, montage, colors, subjects, things happening, the rhythm of the film affects the audience, and if the effect intended by the creators translates into the audience's reception of the film.
I think that we should also mention that improvised in soundtrack can be used as an immediate transfer of energy between the spectator, who is improvising at the same time and author of the film. And that leads us to a question, which
Final
we wanted
question.
to final question. I mean, there are many questions in that what we present, I guess, but we wanted to ask ourselves and you that is there a chance, and I think it's more a rhetoric question actually, to use music that was improvised in the final movie soundtrack. We wanted to try that, and maybe we'll show you the result. It's a film from Zosia, and maybe just shortly about the process. We decided to see the whole film. It was about 7 minutes or so, or 5. We watched it without playing, then made a first session with improvising and the second version, second set of improvising. We recorded everything, and then Zosia made a mix from the thing we improvised, and also music that she imagined would fit with that. So it's actually a mix of improvised music from a live session, but also I think there are some post-production effects in it, but the most important thing I would say maybe after seeing that. Fragment shows very clearly how direct this relationship between people who are watching that for the first or even second time is matched with the emotional state, which has its own climax and end coda, and I guess that also is an example how different that approach of people seeing and moving and improvising to it is different from what a person picking a separate soundtrack which was picked after shooting a film or before maybe is present here. So that's all. We'd like to just underline that we used the graphics of also a member of our collective, and he creates also very directly linked graphics to what we do, and does that very well. And now it's time for the open stage, I guess, but maybe we can open the discussion or Q&A thing now, or
maybe after the
or after like playing.
Some little discussion after the open stage.
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe I'll stand up. It will be easier. So maybe I'll just introduce the thing we prepared for today, just to maybe show you the idea we developed through those 3 years of making improvised events in Warsaw. We have prepared 3 films, and each film will be another set. The first one, we suggest that we will be just watching it and playing to it. We'll be taking care of the groups who will be playing, which will be playing later. I'll just let you know how that will work. The second one will be sing without playing, and then the second time we will be improvising to it. So similar way we did that soundtrack with Zosia's film. And the last one will be a conducted one. So we will be having to pick someone who will be a conductor. We'll establish some basic signs for basic musical parameters, and try to improvise also for the first time without knowing what we'll be saying. Is it clear or? All right. Is there anyone who does not want to improvise with us? No, sorry, that was a badly asked question. How many participants, like potential participants, are by us? Okay, great. So, because I'm considering if we should do it as a large ensemble, which goes through the whole process, or pick smaller groups, but I've seen 5 or 6 people, maybe more, that would fit with a one ensemble, I guess. So maybe if you are willing to do and live through the whole process, then we'll try to do that collectively together. All right. So maybe that's the good time to pick instruments. They're here. There's also a piano, which you've seen for the whole symposium, I guess. And also there are some instruments in the back still, but preferably. But actually, the instruments are here, and maybe you brought some of your own instruments, which you can use. So